It's your boy Hendo checking in though, coming to y'all on a vacation. You know, we on the road, but you know, got the Sprinter van going. But today I want to look at the economy all around the world. We're not going to just look at the US economy. We're going to look at the global economy. And this is up to date information about the economies. Let's go.
So the niggas in Italy found out that the Democrats and the Republicans is working together over where they live at. So they like, listen, the citizens, they like, we banding together. We not paying our fucking bills no more. We not paying our bills. We not paying our rent. We not shopping with y'all. We stocked up on food. We gonna sit our asses right in the crib and nobody gonna do a fuck thing about it. And y'all economy gonna collapse, and that's what it is. And all the citizens, literally all the citizens of Italy are not shopping with the establishment no more. They sitting their ass in the crib. They said fuck work and y'all gonna fix shit around here. And I ain't gonna lie, bro. This is what the fuck we need to be doing in America. Cause there's no way the president is accused of touching kids and these files and all this old cool shit. We at war, all this old dumb shit. Gas prices about to be at fucking $70 a gallon, and we just chilling. The economy, nigga want to see first month's, last month's in security on a $2,000 apartment. That means you got to make $6,000 after taxes legally. Are you fucking kidding me? Yeah, no, you got me fucked up. So if we gonna do anything, I think we should be doing what Italy doing. Quit your job. Don't shop with these niggas no more. You better stock up on some food and keep your black ass in the house until shit get better. They can't kick us all out. But yeah, it's Channel 16 News, and thanks for coming. You feel me? I'm gonna keep y'all updated.
So apparently Italy is getting business done right now. They're not paying their bills, they're not paying their taxes, they're not going to work because they decided that they're done with this shit. I honestly have so much respect for everybody that was able to go out to the No Kings protest on Saturday, but I feel like here in America it's gonna take more than just like protesting every once in a while. I feel like we need to finally stand on business and not go to work, not pay our bills, not pay our taxes, and we're just going to collectively tell these people that we're not doing this anymore until life is more affordable. It totally defeats the purpose in, participating in your own exploitation if everything is unaffordable, if you literally can't afford anything. It's literally doing more harm to us than it is good. And I feel like the only way that things are going to change is if we keep protesting on a daily basis. We're out on the streets and we just stop going to work, we stop paying for everything. But I feel like we're gonna have to be willing to get uncomfortable for a little while, but at the same time you also got to think that it's gonna be worth it in the long run to get uncomfortable for a short period of time. It literally feels like we're almost in a life or death situation. Like after this war with Iran, with gas prices going through the roof, we literally cannot afford anything anymore.
Cuba is in a state of crisis. One of the most visible signs are scenes like this. Garbage uncollected, yet piling up all over Havana. Fuel trucks responsible for addressing this problem are getting fuel in some cases, but a lot of it is being diverted, we hear, illicitly to other sources, people who can afford to buy it. The desperate situation is affecting people of all walks of life, but especially in neighborhoods like this, these scenes are becoming a more common sight. It's not just an eyesore, it's not just a basic breakdown of services. What you're seeing right now is a growing health risk as well. And with pharmacies dwindling, with medical services dwindling, communicable diseases that are bred in places like this are on the rise as well. Despite the adversity all over the place, you do see life going on. Kids are playing basketball just meters away from here. There are markets, there are parties gathering, people playing cards. In many ways, it's just a sign of the resilience of the Cuban people in the face of this very real crisis.
The internet is full of people saying that Cuba suffers because of the US embargo, and I'm about to destroy their theory. Let's start with food and medicine. The US exports hundreds of millions of dollars in food to Cuba every single year. And it isn't just food. US law allows medicine and medical supplies to be sold to Cuba under licenses. So a shortage doesn't mean that something can't automatically enter a country. They can also mean that something gets there and then never actually makes it to the people. Matter of fact, one of Cuba's biggest food suppliers is the United States itself, especially when it comes to poultry. So yeah, the same people that are allegedly starving them are their biggest food supplier. And even if they didn't trade with the US, they still trade with the rest of the world: China, Spain, Canada, Brazil, Mexico, Russia. Cuba trades internationally. So what blockade? Many people don't know this. Let's take Taiwan. Taiwan lives under constant pressure and embargo from China, trade restrictions from that superpower that's up north, just like Cuba with the US is, and it's still one of the world's strongest economies and leaders in tech. So maybe the deciding factor isn't outside pressure, but the policies that exist within the country itself. Let's take a look at the free education and healthcare in Cuba. This is a hospital corridor. Peeling walls, exposed wiring, decades without maintenance. The sanitation inside a medical facility, limited equipment, empty shelves, and doctors still working in these conditions. Mira para allá, no hay ni luz. What the hell is the point of free if the system can't function? Here's the free education in question. Classrooms falling apart, no toilets. It looks like a bomb went off. Now let's take a look at this. Same country, same government, same restrictions. A modern brand new school in Havana for diplomats and foreign families. International kids, essentially. So, resources exist. What blockade? The question is, who ends up receiving them? Because if shortages were the actual problem, then nobody would have anything. But when some have everything and others have nothing, what does that mean? That's a distribution problem. Nothing to do with scarcity. So when it comes to Cuba, the US is not the problem, the Cuban people are not the problem. It's the socialist system and the communist dictatorship that are the problem. A system is not judged by what it promises, it's judged by what it delivers.
So apparently it's true. A lot of us are in the same flipping boat. We're all thinking, is it really worth living in the UK? What am I staying here for?
We borrowed singly in the month of February alone, 13 billion went on debt interest, which is astonishing.
Yeah.
Imagine running a business like that. You couldn't. Yet that's where we are. Yet for much of our political media class, the answer to every problem is more government spending, more borrowing. There's no sense on the left of politics at all of any cost control or even having a discussion about slowing down the rate of increase of spending, let alone actually curtailing spending. The state is so huge, it's crowding out the private sector. The economy isn't growing, and we're probably on the brink now of a recession, and probably would have been anyway, even without the pyrotechnics in the Middle East, which I'm sure we'll come on to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it is completely plausible, I'm afraid, that we could get in a situation where financial markets properly bring the British government to heel through the gilts market. It happened in 1976. It happened in the Eurozone, so big economies like Italy and smaller economies like Ireland in the early 2010s. Technocratic governments. I don't want this to happen. I'm a patriotic guy, but someone has to call out what's happening because this is what people are talking about.
To the UK, you ain't going to believe this video. While we're all out here arguing over what flag somebody's waving and left versus right, watch this and tell me you're not gobsmacked. So there's an image of a Ford Transit and the price in 2004 and 2024. You could get a Ford Transit for 10.5 grand in 2004. Roll on to now, 48,000, best part of 49 grand. Now this is where it gets really interesting. In 2004, the average weekly wage was about 320 quid. Now, the average wage is around about 728 quid. Now, on the surface, that looks like 127% increase. Okay, bear in mind that that's nearly a 400% increase, or it's just over a 400% increase. Nobody's counting, but watch this. Now, the real growth of your wages, taking into account things like inflation, the 2008 market crash, and the jibby-jab type, the real wage increase, you ready, is 27%. Which means that the average weekly income is just over 400 quid. So when the government tells you that inflation is at 3%, the cost of living's coming down, wages have gone up, they're talking utter codswallop. Could you imagine trying to buy a 50 grand van earning 400 quid a week? Impossible for the normal.
The UK is the worst performer financially than any other G7 country for 2026, apparently, despite Rachel Reeves having a tight grip on the UK economy and her plans to grow and to get us out of our woes. This week, just yesterday, the IMF have said that the UK growth could drop to the worst out of any G7 nation. Predicted to be 1.3% in 2026, they're now predicting as low as 0.8%. It's the worst. It's even worse than France. I know, even worse than France. What's all that about? Anyway, apparently it's because of the high levels of government debt and because we are so heavily reliant on importing energy. Well, thank goodness that we don't drill the North Sea and we're going green, because clearly that is the solution that we've all been looking for. Inflation, on top of that, is predicted to grow. It's predicted to go up to 3.5% and maybe above 4% in 2027 before pulling back. And they think it'll only pull back when the Iran war stops and the Gulf of Hormuz opens up and oil and gas start flowing freely and then prices start to drop. So whilst I'm no big fan of the IMF, I never like what the IMF say. I think they're just a funding arm for the world elites, the global elites who just lend money to everyone and put them in debt and then tell them what to do. I think Labour are going to be worried about this because as Rachel Reeves prepares to fly out to Washington for more meetings, the masters up at the IMF are forecasting the UK economy is going down the spout. So what next? Surely we're not going to see the house builders slowing down their building as prices go up, construction materials go up, banks put up interest rates, there's no mortgages. Are we going to get 1.3 million houses delivered in the next 3 years before Labour actually have to go to a general election? Can it get any worse? Who can they blame? On a plus side, you want some good news, the sun is coming out, we're heading into spring, blue skies, sandy beaches, a calm channel for crossing. Oh yeah, Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the chat. Stiff upper lip. Let's be positive where we can. Let's not let it get on top of us, guys. We can get through this. As Winston Churchill once said, when the going gets tough, the tough roll up their sleeves and go to work. Come on, Britain. Oh, we can do it. Talk to you soon. Take care.
This woman right here is one of the very reasons Australia is so messed up today, and I'm going to expose them all. So check this video out. This is the Federal Minister of Finance in Australia.
On RN last week, you said there's been $114 billion of savings across your budgets. Mm-hmm. Is that net savings or gross savings?
Well, it's savings and reprioritising.
So you're saying that's net of spending decisions? You reduced expenditure by $114 billion?
It's a gross figure.
So it's gross, right. What is the net figure?
I don't have that available.
Is it positive or negative?
Well, I just don't have that figure.
But if you spend every dollar that you saved, it's not a save, is it? It's just spending it on something else.
Well, you know, that can be the way you twist it.
Honestly, what a joke. Now it gets worse, but firstly, let's establish what her role is as a federal finance minister. Firstly, one of the roles is finding how the government can save money. Well, no, she lied about that and blew $160 billion that she claimed to have saved to the public, and when someone questions her about this, she says this.
You know, that can be the way you twist it.
I am literally losing brain cells hearing her speak. Now, secondly, her key role is ensuring spending stays within budgets. So here's another video of her excellent skills.
$30 billion of cost blowout. It's your budget, and you don't know where $30 billion went.
No.
Is it under the couch? Is it, is it behind the TV? Where is the $30 billion? My point is why you, Minister, don't understand where $30 billion went missing. I
think the minister
if I was reading that, but that's one of the, when I read my email, I was like, what's that? But you didn't ask those questions. You don't seem to be across your own budget.
Well, I don't know where you were when we released my EFO, but I spoke about this at length.
Well, you obviously didn't read it. If I were in your shoes, I would be holding myself to account, which you are not. You're making excuses when you have wasted, you have totally missed $10 billion on one program. And so this is why we have the highest interest rates in the developed world right now.
Now, I don't think people understand how much that is. $30 billion, and she has no clue where it went. The Federal Minister of Finance, whose one job is to focus on where money is going, just randomly loses $30 billion. She has no clue where it is. I am pretty sure a requirement to run any part of our country is you have to have one brain cell or less. That seems to be the only similarity across the entire government. Honestly, let me know the solution to this Like, you literally can't trust a word one of these pricks say to you anymore. They just lie and tell you exactly what you want to hear so they can keep their paycheck. Honestly, let me know your thoughts in the comments below.
This will come as no surprise to anyone who drives a car. The oil shock has hit the Australian economy and inflation figures. For the 12 months to March, headline inflation is sitting at 4.6%. Up from 3.7%, the figure for February. The rise driven by a 24% increase in automotive fuel over the year, triggered by the Iran war and the closure of that key shipping channel, the Strait of Hormuz. The Reserve Bank meets next Tuesday to decide on interest rates. The board has already hiked twice this year, taking the official cash rate to 4.1%. One little saving grace for mortgage holders, though, is that underlying inflation has held at 3.3% for the 12 months to March. That measure strips out volatile items like fuel. And also next month, the government will hand down the federal budget.
The world is on fire, and nobody is looking where it really matters. Every headline screams about the Middle East, chaos, and global fear. The media wants you glued to the Strait of Hormuz and the rising price of oil. But it's a lie, a distraction. The real story is in Japan. In 2024, after 17 years, the planet's biggest creditor ended its era of free money. The engine of the global economy is sputtering in Tokyo. And if you have a mortgage, a savings account, or a 401k, you're in the crosshairs. Chapter 1, the demographic black hole. On the surface, Japan looks like it's already living in the future, a place where tech giants dominate the world stage. Robots share the streets with people, AI predicts what'll come next, and entire cities run smarter, cleaner, and faster than anywhere else. But look past the distractions, dim the neon signs, forget the shiny gadgets. Focus instead on the finances, the numbers. That's where Japan's deepest, darkest, most disturbing secrets lie. The demographic death spiral. Because in 2026, Japan's population officially sits at approximately 122.6 million people. That might sound like a lot, but in 2010 it was even higher, 128 million to be precise. Since the late 2000s, Japan has been on a steady, unrelenting decline. It's losing around 500,000 people from its population every single year. That's like the city of Atlanta vanishing every 12 months. To make matters worse, Japan also has the highest proportion of elderly citizens anywhere in the world. In 2014, close to 26% of the population was over 65. By 2022, that increased to more than 29%. The population is getting older while the birth rate is hitting its lowest level in more than a century. Fewer and fewer people are choosing to start families. Birth rates are falling. Meanwhile, the number of people of working age keeps shrinking. It's reached the point where now there are 2 deaths in Japan for every birth. That is a problem for a lot of reasons, especially for the economy. Every year that these trends continue, Japan's tax base disappears bit by bit. With more retirees, fewer families, and fewer people paying taxes, Japan's financial foundations are starting to crack. But the Bank of Japan saw this problem coming, and they acted in a way that was desperate, dramatic, unprecedented. They made money free. Instead of raising interest rates to fight the problem, they kept them at zero. At times, they went below zero. At the same time, trillions of yen were pumped into the system. The Bank of Japan became one of the biggest buyers of its own stocks. In effect, it socialized its stock market just to keep the lights on. It was a gamble, one with a massive amount of risk attached. No other central bank of any major developed nation around the world operated the same way as Japan's. But somehow the gamble paid off, at least for a little while. People and businesses didn't have to worry about paying back much more than they'd originally borrowed. Loans became almost irresistible. Families took them. Businesses took them. Everyone wanted in. Why wouldn't they? It was almost like free money. Wall Street hedge funds and investment firms took advantage too, but on a much bigger scale. They realized they could borrow huge amounts of the Japanese yen at 0% interest and convert all of that cash to dollars. They would then use that cash to buy U.S. tech stocks, treasury bonds, or anything else they wanted. It was known as the yen carry trade, and it was like some sort of video game infinite money glitch, a seemingly foolproof way to guarantee returns. For a while, Japan retained its status as an innovative, pioneering, and world-leading nation in more ways than one. But as gamers know all too well, glitches get patched. The system couldn't last. The so-called stability it provided was, in actual fact, little more than just a band-aid slapped hastily over a gaping hole in a broken economy. It was only a matter of time until that sticking plaster began to peel away. Private investments went nowhere, wages stalled, public debt spiraled, reaching a staggering 260% of the country's gross domestic product, or GDP, by 2022. Soon, the Bank of Japan was running out of options, so they went further, much further. They forced 10-year government bond yields to stay at zero. The country was borrowing at home for nothing and then exporting those profits around the world, hoping that the inflation would never rise too fast. But in 2026, that gamble is coming to an end. Now Japan is left with an incredibly big bill to settle. First, we want to thank the sponsor of today's video, Incogni. Have you ever searched your own name online and found way more than you expected? Your home address, phone number, email, even information about your relatives can end up on people search sites and data broker databases. And once that information is out there, it can be used for phishing scams, identity theft, harassment, or worse. That's why I decided to try Incogni. Getting started was simple. I created my account, selected whose personal data I wanted removed, and gave Incogni permission to work on my behalf. From there, Incogni contacts data brokers for you, sends removal requests, deals with the objections, and keeps you updated along the way. What I really liked is the dashboard, because it makes the whole process feel real. You can actually see the requests going out and track the progress over time. And after more than a week, it's much easier to see just how much work Incogni is doing for you behind the scenes. This feels especially important right now because major data breaches keep exposing personal information, and that data can be used to make scam emails, calls, and texts seem that much more convincing. I recently got one of those text messages saying a package couldn't be delivered and that I needed to click a link to fix it. And because I was actually expecting a package, it looked way more legitimate than it should have. That's the problem with having so much personal information floating around online. Even one profile left up can create real risks. Incogni also has a new custom removals feature on the Unlimited and Family Unlimited plans. So if you find your information on specific people search sites or another website, you can flag it, and one of Incogni's privacy agents will handle the rest for you. Go to incogni.com/TIS and use code TIS for an exclusive 60% off. Again, that's incogni.com/TIS, code TIS for 60% off. Chapter 2, The Widowmaker Detonates. The Bank of Japan had hoped that it would never come to this, and for years it didn't. Crisis after crisis hit, and somehow it held. But anyone watching closely knew it couldn't last. It was never a question of if the bubble would burst, only when. A bomb had been planted, we just didn't know how long the fuse was. Now we do. The explosion is here, and the spark that started it all was rising costs of oil and energy. In 2026, crude oil prices have surged by close to 50%, and it's having an impact all over the world. For a resource-poor nation like Japan, rising rates are a death sentence. As prices rise, central banks of countries all over the world have been forced to take action. In the US, rates still sit at 3.75%. It's a similar story in the UK and across Europe. But elsewhere, the pressure is building. Interest rates passed the 4% mark in Australia, 5% in India, and even close to 7% in places like Mexico and South Africa. And in the middle of all of this, Japan was trapped. On the one hand, it could raise rates but basically bankrupt its own government. It carries the highest debt-to-GDP ratio of any nation in the entire developed world. Or it could keep rates at 0%, but sacrifice the value of its currency in the process. Neither of these options was attractive, but the Bank of Japan had to pick one. It decided to persist with its 0% rate, and the results have been catastrophic. The yen has effectively gone into free fall. 5 years ago, in 2021, the yen was sitting at less than 110 to the dollar. But by late 2022, it was approaching 150. In April 2026, it's close to the 160 mark, hovering near its weakest point in decades. In just a few years, the Japanese currency has lost more than 30% of its value. For businesses, families, workers, it was devastating. Before they knew what hit them, salaries and savings were slashed. The money they had spent years earning was suddenly worth far less than it had been just a few years ago. It's just one of the ways the Japanese public has suffered. The cost to import goods to the country has also skyrocketed, leading to higher prices for numerous products and services. The more the Bank of Japan waited, the worse the situation would become. The yen would continue to spiral. They couldn't allow their own national currency to become worthless. They had to act. So, in a state of panic, policymakers made a decision almost 20 years in the making. They raised interest rates to 0.75%, with plans to increase them all the way up to 1% by 2027. It might not sound like much, and in isolation, it isn't. But compare it to the rest of the world, the US, the UK, Australia, rates of 2, 3, or 4% aren't uncommon. A rate of just 1% would actually be something of a freak occurrence. But for the Japanese financial system, 1% or even 0.75% is a seismic amount. It means that 17 years of free borrowing and free debt are coming to an end. And that doesn't just impact Japan and its people, it affects the whole world. For years on Wall Street, there was one investment strategy everyone had heard of. A strategy built on shorting the Japanese government bonds, betting that prices would fall and yields would finally rise. A gamble against decades of history, a bet that the Bank of Japan would finally break its own trend after years of stubbornly holding 0% interest. They called it the Widowmaker, and the name wasn't just for show. So many people who used this strategy ended up losing enormous amounts of capital because the Bank of Japan never did what they wanted it to do. It continued to maintain near zero or even negative rates year after year. But in 2025 and continuing into 2026, that all changed. The Widowmaker paid off. Trillions of dollars borrowed at nearly 0% in Japan have been flowing around the world, and now they're starting to seep away. The hedge funds and investors who were on the right side of the bet are making a fortune. Meanwhile, banks and firms that borrowed yen at 0% and poured it into risk assets or treasuries are scrambling to cash out while they still can. But while the top gets richer, the bottom pays the price. Everyday people, families, workers, and those who had no hand in the gamble are the ones footing the bill. Chapter 3. The Great Repatriation. This is the final nail in the coffin, the part that the media won't explain. They don't even want people to know about it until it's already too late. An event that is both catastrophic and almost invisible. A crash you won't see coming, but one that will shape the economic future of not just Japan, but the United States and dozens of other countries around the world. A shockwave that could be felt for years, even generations. The repatriation of the yen. The wealthiest and most important Japanese investors, including mega banks, pension funds, and insurance companies, are some of the biggest foreign holders of American debt. As a nation, Japan owns a whopping $1.2 trillion in United States treasuries. To put such an astronomical figure into perspective, $1.2 trillion is enough to fund the entire U.S. military for around 18 months. It's enough to end world hunger several times over. It is an insane amount of money, or to be more exact, an insane amount of American debt, all held in the hands of a single nation in a different continent. For years, it made sense for Japan's institutions to hold that debt. The Japanese Government Pension Investment Fund, or GPIF, is the world's biggest pension fund and has historically held on to a massive amount of foreign bonds. U.S. Treasuries made up 51% of its foreign bond portfolio in March 2025. There was a logic to that decision. U.S. bonds paid interest, while Japanese ones paid nothing. But now that logic is being washed away by the rising tide of Japan's interest rates. As those rates draw closer to 1% and the 10-year Japanese government bond yield surges past 2%, the math has been flipped. Why should a Japanese institution or pension fund like the GPIF continue to run the risk of holding America's debt while it could invest in its own government bonds instead? These companies, these banks, these pension funds no longer have the same incentive to chase returns abroad. Domestic investments finally pay off, and it doesn't take a financial genius to see the obvious. It is time to sell. We found data showing a quiet but growing exodus. Japan is cashing out. It's selling off its assets, dumping U.S. Treasury holdings at a record rate. That doesn't mean the entire $1.2 trillion will disappear overnight, but billions are starting to evaporate, and those billions can quickly turn into tens or hundreds of billions as the weeks go by. The ripples won't just stay in Japan. They'll spread across markets, across borders, across the Pacific. Because when the biggest buyer of U.S. debt bows out, who steps in to fill the void? The simple answer is no one. At least not at first. To attract new buyers and convince the world to absorb the debt, the Federal Reserve will be forced to act. Rates will have to go up. And when that happens, everything else is affected. Mortgage rates climb. Credit card interest rates soar. You're suddenly faced with spiraling costs. Everything becomes more expensive. Spending power diminishes and disposable income vanishes. Meanwhile, the stock market starts to bleed. Government bonds are far more attractive than risky bets like tech stocks. Money begins to move fast. For years, the yen carry trade was the grease in the wheels of the entire global financial machine. It kept everything running smoothly. It allowed those Wall Street hedge funds to borrow billions and pump it all into big businesses across America and beyond. Now those same funds are seeing their borrowing costs explode. They're backed into a corner, and they're running out of options. They're forced to sell their most profitable positions. Shares in companies like Apple, Nvidia, Microsoft, they're all dumped just to cover spiraling yen debts. This is the invisible crash. It doesn't dominate the headlines. It doesn't involve mass panic at the New York Stock Exchange or vast crowds of people protesting in the streets. It happens quietly in the background, and the world has no idea. Chapter 4. The Sovereign Debt Trap. We've reached a critical point in history, something the global economy has been building toward for nearly 20 years. And at the center of it all is Japan. It's pinned between two outcomes, both dangerous, both unavoidable. It is the ultimate sovereign debt trap. It either keeps interest rates low and protects its debt, but watches its currency collapse and its country starve, or it raises rates and temporarily saves its economy, but it sets its own national debt on fire. as well as detonating the entire global bond market. There is no out, no alternative option, no last-ditch magical solution. The fuse was lit a long time ago, and now it's reached the powder keg. The yen is just the first domino to fall, but it won't be the last. The dollar is next, and when that begins, everything changes, which leads to a question the world has quietly been avoiding. What if the U.S. economy crashes?
I'm here in Japan, and I sit here every day and watch businesses close down. I watch my cost of living increase. And I feel like we're the litmus test for the globe. And people, and when I talk to people, they all say the same thing. They're not eating out. They're cutting back on shopping. They're not going on holidays. They're staying at home. So, Netflix, they'll be fine. Hulu, streaming services, maybe some online shopping. But eating out, that's gone. Holidays, gone. Traveling, driving, weekends away, gone. That's going to be really bad for the economy. Okay. Sussy Susie says hiring. I think that is something that I mentioned this in a video recently. I think that is something that is going to come back after companies realize that they've over restructured, they've over sacked people.
I honestly have to give a bravo to the Illuminati for this one, because this is absolutely devious. It's like evil genius level intelligent nefariousness. Listen to this. South Korea calls for energy saving campaign, including shorter showers and car curbs. It's a car curb? Well, it's a private sector vehicle curb, which is voluntary for now, but could be reviewed if the energy alert level increased. What does that mean? They want less people driving private passenger cars. They want public institutions would cut back on their use of passenger cars. So what does this mean? Well, we know part of the plan is that they don't even want you having a privately owned vehicle. We've seen videos from the World Economic Forum saying the future when, you own nothing and you'll be happy because there's public transit to take you everywhere. But how do you get people to abandon their privately owned vehicles? Well, you make it so that they either can't afford to drive or are not allowed to drive because they have to save the oil reserves in their country. Because oil, of course, runs out, right? It doesn't self-replenish, no. Problem, reaction, solution. We're seeing it again in real time. This is 2020 2.0, and it's coming here. We saw it when it unfolded.
You might have seen the video South Korea is over by Kurzgesagt with this melting Korean flag and 13 million views. It kind of explains why Korea is headed for a certain collapse. But the real story is a little more complicated. After the Korean War, South Korea was one of the poorest countries in the world. But in just 2 decades, it became a developed country. And it's one of the fastest economic recoveries in modern history. We now call it the miracle on the Han River. They did this by pushing aggressive top-down policies that mobilized the entire labor force. But the mindset was actually pretty simple. Economic warfare, using the same kind of discipline used in war, now for growth and industry and modernization. Then in the late 90s, it collapsed again. The Korean won lost half its value overnight. More than 2 million people lost their jobs. IMF had to issue a $58 billion loan, which is the largest bailout ever issued at that time. My parents were among the thousands who left during that time. But somehow Korea bounced back. Fast. Within 2 years, the GDP surged. They paid back the IMF loan early, and Seoul became a global player in tech and finance. I used to think the normal working days were from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., Monday to Saturday, because that's what my dad did. But that kind of aggressive progress always comes at a cost. Now, Korea has the lowest birth rate in the world. Young people are burning out. Seniors are aging into poverty. And beneath all the success and the K-pop and the K-beauty is generations of people who feel like they were never allowed to rest.
South Korea has a problem. that makes every other economic crisis look manageable. And it's not what you think. This isn't about North Korean missiles or trade wars with China. This is about something far more fundamental. South Korea is facing a rapid demographic contraction. The numbers are stark. South Korea's fertility rate hit 0.72 births per woman in 2023. To put that in perspective, a society needs roughly 2.1 births per woman just to maintain its population. South Korea is producing 1/3 of the children needed for demographic stability. But here's what makes this case unusually severe. This isn't happening in a war-torn country or a failed state. This is happening in one of the world's most technologically advanced economies, a global leader in innovation, education, and industrial production. South Korea's demographic collapse represents the cutting edge of a crisis that's spreading across every developed economy. What we're witnessing isn't just a population problem. It's the failure of advanced capitalism to provide young people with the economic foundation necessary to build families. Let me explain how we got here, why traditional solutions aren't working, and what this means for every country watching their own fertility rates decline. The scale of South Korea's demographic challenge becomes clear when you examine the trajectory. In 1960, South Korean women averaged 6 children. By 1990, that had fallen to 1.6. Today, it's 0.72 and still declining. These aren't abstract statistics. They translate into economic reality very quickly. South Korea's population peaked at 51.8 million in 2020. Long-term projections indicate a significant decline under current trends. But the raw numbers don't capture the economic mechanics at work. South Korea's working-age population, those between 15 and 64, will shrink from 37 million today to an estimated 23 million by 2050. That's a 38% decline in the labor force in just 25 years. Meanwhile, the number of South Koreans over 65 will nearly double, from 8.5 million today to approximately 16 million by 2050. The dependency ratio, the number of non-working elderly per working age adult, will reach levels that challenge the fiscal sustainability of any modern welfare state. South Korea isn't alone in facing demographic transition. Japan's fertility rate is 1.3, Germany's is 1.5. Even China, with all its economic dynamism, has seen its fertility rate fall to 1.2. But South Korea represents the extreme end of this trend. What makes South Korea's situation particularly instructive is how rapid the transformation has been. This demographic collapse occurred during a period of extraordinary economic success. South Korea went from being one of the world's poorest countries in the 1960s to achieving developed nation status by the 1990s. The conventional explanation focuses on cultural factors, rising education level.
The U.S. is paying over $1 trillion a year in interest alone on our $39 trillion of debt. $1 trillion just in interest. Most people don't even know this, and they don't even understand what that means. Let's get into it. Let's get into what that means for the economy and you. We only bring in $5.3 trillion a year from taxes and other incomes. We get to $39 trillion in debt. I want you to think about this as if you make $15,000 a year, but you spend $20,000. That money that you borrow comes from somewhere, and you also pay interest on it. Where do we get that extra money, that $39 trillion that we're paying $1 trillion interest alone on? We get it by selling U.S. Treasury bonds. Basically, it's an IOU. It's a credit card, essentially, and it makes interest, like a revolving credit. Who buys Treasury bonds? Regular investors, banks and pension funds, foreign countries like Japan, China, and the UK, and even the Federal Reserve. Now, here is the part that should concern everyone. The amount of interest we paid before we fed any of our people, did any social programs or any infrastructure in 2024 was $1.156 trillion for the year. In 2025, we paid $1.227 trillion. That's just interest. That does not take our debt down any further. In fact, it adds to our debt, and then we pay interest on that higher amount. 2026 is already 6.1% higher in interest than 2025. So we owe 39 trillion. The interest is 6.1% higher, and we're not making any dent on that 39 trillion. We are on track to pay $1.3 trillion just in interest alone on that $39 trillion of debt in 2026. That means the government cannot spend any dollar on anything, schools, healthcare, Social Security, the military, because it has to pay over $1 trillion just to cover the interest on that debt. This is like having a credit card bill so big you can't afford anything else. And when you make a payment, it mostly goes to interest. I am going to do a post 2. Please like, comment, follow, and share.
Let me give you an update of where we are with the economy with this whole war happening. Gas hit 4.18 a gallon nationally today. This is the highest in nearly 4 years. That's 1.19 more than what you were paying before this whole war started on February 28th. In California, it's already at $7 a gallon. Oil is now above 111 a barrel internationally. Analysts are warning that it could hit 115 this year or more. A little context, before the war started, it was at $72. So 111, it's crazy. So what does this mean for you over the next 2 weeks? Every week the Strait stays closed, it adds $3 to $5 per barrel to oil prices. So in 2 weeks, you could be looking at gas at $4.30 to $4.50 nationally. Of course, this varies by state. California could be pushing more than $7. Okay, now groceries. Inflation is at 3.3%, the highest in 2 years. But food prices specifically are up more than that because everything that gets delivered by truck is affected by fuel costs. A family of 4 that was spending $250 on groceries is now spending closer to $275 to $280 a week. The World Food Program warned that if this conflict continues, more than 45 million people could face food insecurity this year. That is not just overseas. That affects food supply chains that reach American stores too. And economists are clear, okay? Even if things got better tomorrow or a deal happened, food prices and gas prices are not just going to go down magically or come back down quickly. It took months for prices to rise. It's going to take maybe years for prices to go down. If talks resume and the Strait reopens, you might see some relief at the pump in a couple of months. Only a tiny bit. If talks collapse completely and the ceasefire breaks down, that could mean that by Memorial Day, we might see $5 gallon nationally. This is a real possibility. Listen, I keep telling you guys, prepare yourselves. I just got laid off. Things are not looking great right now. I've never in my entire life have never been unemployed, have never been laid off ever, and now I am. So this is crazy to me. Prepare, stock up on non-perishables. I have a few videos where I tell you how to prepare yourselves because I don't know where we're going with this. Anyway, stay safe and I'll keep making more videos. Follow me for more content. Okay, bye.
We just got the first economic report card of 2026 with the Bureau of Economic Analysis releasing Q1 GDP. That's a measure of how much the economy grew or shrank from January to March of this year. And despite a lot of economic concern with the war with Iran and even Trump's tariff agenda, this report showed pretty solid growth. It showed our economy expanded by 2% in this quarter, and this was even though we were entrenched in this war with Iran all of March, which did result in significantly higher gas prices. Still, consumers spent, according to this report, which is part of the reason why the economy grew. And the data showed that people continued to invest. Now, it is important to point out that this is the first estimate for Q1 GDP for 2026. There's always a second estimate, usually in about 30 days, and the final number in 60 days. And there have been some significant revisions in the past. Just look at the previous report from this one. It showed initial GDP for Q4 was 1.4%. That was eventually revised down to only 0.5% of growth. So you do have to take today's number with a grain of salt. But for right now, it does show economic resilience in the U.S. economy, despite all of the economic headwinds.